Your parents, with no assets, are just a waste of life. I was shocked by these words from my husband Zachary on National Grandparents' Day. No child can forgive the insult to their parents who raised them with all their might. Little did Zachary know, this single sentence was about to drastically change his life. Even I, who am usually timid, couldn't forgive him this time. I'm leaving. My name is Alice. After turning 30, I met Zachary through a friend's introduction. Our dating period was short, but we soon married. Zachary, who was a department head at his company, was the exact opposite of my plain self, handsome and popular amongst his co-workers. He was successful in sales and trusted by his boss. In the beginning, he was very reliable and gentlemanly towards me, which drew me to marry him. I worked as a secretary at a different company, so I was somewhat able to support Zachary, who was in sales. When I was a secretary, my style was neat and a bit flashy, with makeup, quite different from how I am now. Being a secretary involved a lot of overtime, which was exhausting, so I quit before getting married. After marriage, his attitude began to change drastically. He would be cold every day, and if I was too tired to prepare dinner, he would get furious. I chose and bought gifts for Zachary's business clients, but if the response was bad, he blamed me, a complete change from before our marriage. Despite our strained marriage, I love Zachary and try my best every day. Zachary's parents, both civil servants, dote on their only son, Zachary, giving him branded accessories monthly. On visits home, Zachary always wears newly bought brand clothes, perhaps to appear as a good son. I don't understand it, but as long as it doesn't affect me negatively, it's fine. I meet my parents-in-law once a year, but their overprotectiveness doesn't leave a good impression. They are very critical of me. Dress up more to match Zachary. You're his wife, after all. There are complaints about cooking and other things, but it's endless. Of course, I've improved where necessary, but I haven't changed my appearance, as it's my personal preference. As I said, I don't have a good impression of them, but I don't hate them. I think they say these things because they care too much about Zachary, so I'm not offended. They can be very kind at times. However, Zachary didn't seem to have a good impression of my parents. It was when he first visited my parents' house for a greeting before our marriage. My parents' home is in the countryside, away from the city. My parents, who worked for a major company, are frugal, so they dress in modest clothes and live in an old house. But I love my hard-working parents. They've saved all their money for me and their grandchildren. Zachary seemed well-behaved during the visit, but let his true feelings slip once we returned home. Your parents are too poor. They can't even flatter properly. He judged and insulted my parents based on their appearance. I was about to get furious when I heard that, but I calmed Zachary down. There's no need to flatter, but there's certainly a way to say things. Zachary said he'd never meet my parents again, and hasn't since. Even when my parents invite us for dinner, he refuses, saying, "I won't go." Years have passed, and he still refuses to meet them. One day, Zachary came home in a particularly good mood. Something happy must have happened at work, a relief compared to his usual irritability. As a salesperson, he's often frustrated, so I have to be careful. Today in sales, a major company agreed to my deal. I might get a higher position soon. Zachary happily shared this with me. I nodded along and celebrated with him. It seems a major company he negotiated with has agreed to a deal and will make a substantial investment. Negotiating with a major company isn't easy. It greatly depends on personality, reputation, and sales approach. It's especially important to highlight the benefits to the other party. Next time, there's a meeting at their company, so prepare a nice gift for me. When tasked with choosing a gift, I listen to Zachary's descriptions of the people and do my research. Having been a secretary, I got into the habit of thoroughly researching and understanding the preferences of business partners. But while researching, I realized I knew the company of Zachary's business contact. It was where my dad, Edgar, and my mom, Georgia, are currently working. Zachary was going to have a meeting with an executive from that company, so I thought Dad might know something and contacted him. Of course, Dad knew and gave me detailed information. Thanks to him, I could prepare the perfect gift. The meeting a few days later was reportedly a success. September came, and National Grandparents' Day was approaching, so I decided to look around department stores for gifts for our parents. I carefully selected and noted the items they would prefer. On my way back, I ran into Zachary's mother, Barbara, and we ended up going to a restaurant. Barbara talked at length about Zachary, recounting stories from his childhood to the present. I'd heard these stories many times before, so responding was a bit exhausting. It seemed Barbara was there to buy a reward for Zachary, who she proudly spoils every month. I kept my thoughts to myself, wondering if it's really a reward if it's a monthly occurrence. By the way, how are Edgar and Georgia doing? Our parents-in-law and my parents don't meet often, but they keep in touch and seem to get along well. I told her they were very busy with work. My parents travel frequently for business, a routine since my childhood. I've often wished they'd rest, but usually they respond with, "It's an important time now." However, when they can take a break, they enjoy it fully, often going on trips together. Actually, I heard Zachary meets Edgar and Georgia occasionally and is very grateful for their help. No, Zachary hasn't met my parents in a while. Barbara looked confused, likely never imagining Zachary would lie to her. I wondered what Zachary had been telling her, but I decided not to inquire further. Barbara looked puzzled, but quickly changed the subject. Edgar and Georgia's company is doing well recently. I'm very happy for them. Barbara seemed well informed about my parents' work. I hadn't talked much about it, so aside from knowing they worked for a major company, I was unaware of the details. Seeing my confused look, Barbara shared more about my parents' work. According to her, they are the president and secretary of a major company respectively. Moreover, it was the very company Zachary was dealing with, which surprised me the most. Mom had been Dad's secretary for years, and they share a deep bond as a couple. Barbara once worked for my parents' company and admired them greatly, but she left the job after an arranged marriage. She still respects my parents immensely. It was new to me to hear how respected and cool my parents are, as I've always seen them as simply a loving couple. My perception of my parents shifted slightly. After Barbara shared her feelings about my parents, we parted ways as it was time to head home. I prepared dinner and waited for Zachary's return, relieved that his recent good moods meant less venting at me. When Zachary arrived, I planned to discuss National Grandparents' Day gifts. A few minutes later, Zachary came home, and we started dinner. I showed him the notes I had taken during my department store visit, and consulted him about the gifts. I've already bought mine, so just buy whatever for your side. I thought we were going to buy gifts separately, so I decided to go shopping the next day. It was unusual for Zachary to have already bought a present. Probably it was due to his good mood from the deal. Without doubting Zachary's words, I prepared for the day. Then came National Grandparents' Day. We planned to visit both sets of parents with gifts. First to Zachary's parents' house, then to mine. Zachary was his usual smiling self in front of his parents, mixing truth and lies in his conversation. His parents, happy to see Zachary busy, had bought him another branded gift. I gave Barbara her present and returned to the car with Zachary. I thought we were headed to my parents next, but the car took a different route. Zachary, isn't this the way home? What else would it be? Perhaps we would visit another day. I couldn't grasp what Zachary meant. When I asked when we would go, he said he didn't want to and saw no reason to. We arrived home while I was still questioning. Was he only going to give gifts to his parents, leaving mine with nothing? I pointed out that my parents were his in-laws and part of the family too. His response was unbelievable. Your parents with no assets? Living longer is just a waste of life. Hearing my parents insulted, I was more sad than angry, tears threatening to fall. I couldn't understand why he would say such a thing. I took a deep breath, looked Zachary in the eye, and said, "Don't disrespect my parents. I'm leaving." I grabbed what I needed and ran out of the house, ignoring Zachary's yelling behind me. Without friends nearby, I called my parents for a ride. Mom stayed on the phone, comforting me as I cried. I couldn't forgive Zachary for mocking my kind parents. When they arrived, my tears had stopped. "Are you okay, Alice? What happened?" Unable to recount what had just happened, I looked down. After a while, I told my parents what Zachary had said. They were shocked, never imagining he could be so cruel. But they believed me and comforted me. Tears welled up again at their kindness. "Thank you for crying for us. We can't forgive him for saying such awful things." Mom seemed calm, but I knew she was angry inside, and Dad was furious with Zachary. I regretted not standing up more to Zachary, but my parents kept praising my efforts. They said they had a good idea for us, and I trusted them. When asked about divorce, I realized I couldn't endure more and decided to proceed. Dad then made a phone call and went outside. The next morning, staying at my parents' house, I woke up to see them dressed perfectly, ready to go somewhere. Their attire suggested work, but the atmosphere was different. They told me to get ready, so I did, without asking questions. We arrived at Zachary's company. The company was in a glass-covered skyscraper, clearly a prestigious one. Dad and Mom confidently entered and handed their business cards to the receptionist, summoning someone. I had my suspicions when we arrived at Zachary's company, but seeing the person they called confirmed it. My parents had summoned Zachary and his company's CEO. Zachary seemed confused about why I was there and restrained himself in front of the CEO, though clearly irritated. He seemed not to recognize my parents, having not met them in a while. After brief greetings, my parents took out their business cards. "Sorry for the intrusion. We're presidents of a company involved in your dealings, and we need to discuss something urgent." It was my first time seeing my parents in work mode, and it felt fresh. My parents looked at Zachary and smiled. "Our daughter has been in your care." Sensing the tension, Zachary's face paled. The CEO, trying to charm my parents, asked if there was a problem. Mom spoke up, glaring at Zachary, then directly addressing the CEO. "We've decided to withdraw from the deal due to disrespectful behavior from your employee, Zachary, who is our son-in-law." Hearing this, the CEO and Zachary turned pale. The CEO asked for details, and I recounted the incident. Zachary tried to deny it, but was silenced by my parents' authority. The CEO's face turned red with anger toward Zachary. Despite Zachary's apologies alongside the CEO, my parents were unforgiving. My parents handed over a divorce paper, making Zachary sign it, and stood up. "Please avoid any further contact with Alice. And it seems our business dealings are over," they told Zachary before we left. Outside, we could hear the CEO scolding Zachary. A significant deal, ruined by misjudgment and insulting the president of a partnering company, would undoubtedly anger the CEO. Grateful to my parents for their help, I decided to go to the house I shared with Zachary and collect my things. I felt relieved, realizing it's essential to prioritize oneself, no matter the love. After packing, I deleted Zachary's contacts, cutting all ties. We then went to explain everything to Barbara, who was speechless and apologetically wept for Zachary's actions. Barbara was so shocked she couldn't speak, and she apologized on behalf of Zachary for his terrible words about my parents, whom she respected. Barbara cried a lot afterward, but I liked her, so I expressed my gratitude, and we left Zachary's family home to finalize the divorce preparations. According to my parents, the CEO later called to apologize again and shared what happened with Zachary. After the incident, Zachary was scolded severely by the infuriated CEO, resulting in a pay cut and dismissal. It was inevitable, considering the significant loss the company suffered. The cancellation of the deal with my parents' company led to termination of other business deals too, causing a downturn in Zachary's former company's performance. The CEO must be struggling now. Zachary, having lost a good job, must be wondering what to do next. Barbara, who lectured him too, means Zachary also lost his parents' trust, but I hope he learns to live rightly. The divorce proceeded smoothly and was finalized recently. I moved back home and changed jobs to help and learn more at my parents' company. A year later, I attended a corporate party with my parents. A corporate party is a place where senior executives from major companies gather to hear about recent developments and celebrate company successes. At the party, I fell in love with the son of a business associate introduced by my parents. He was very considerate and supportive, comforting me in an unfamiliar setting. He too was divorced due to his wife's infidelity. We shared many interests and eventually started dating. After a while, we decided to live together. He was very attentive, making sure I felt comfortable. A stark contrast to my life with Zachary. When he proposed, he said I could take my time to think about it, and 2 years later, he proposed again, and I decided to marry him. Our relationship, built over a long time, has continued to be happy even after our marriage. Working at my parents' company, I've come to know and respect them more than before. If I hadn't consulted my parents at that time, I might have been crushed alone or continued to be mistreated by Zachary. I can't thank my parents enough for their help and support. I want to be more filial and repay their kindness. I am deeply grateful to my parents for having me. Years later, I had a child with my husband, and we live as a family of 3. I want to raise my child to be strong and kind, just as my parents taught me. I've resolved to be a stronger mother for my child's sake. People often say I've changed, and I'm grateful to my husband and child for that. Marriage and relationships require equal standing and compassion, Without these, they don't last. Maybe I lacked these for Zachary, but even if I had been more considerate, the outcome might not have changed. Now, I want to cherish my current family and live looking